Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is May 12th, 2016. We've been off for about 3 weeks. Michael, Golden Week is behind us. A lot has happened, actually, during the hiatus.
Yeah, we took a long time off and apologize for that. But otherwise, we are going to get back on track. And a lot of things go on hiatus as well during Golden Week. That's when all the politicians in Japan actually leave Tokyo, even though the Diet is in session.
Right. Well, the Prime Minister went to Europe. He importantly went to the Russian Federation as well. He visited the Prime Minister there.
Well, he visited with Mr. Putin, and Mr. Putin, and he had a long talk. And there's some question as to what they talked about. They spoke for about 3 hours, and the Abe, when after Abe came out, was exultant, according to the Yomiuri Shimbun, saying that he had introduced the concept of there being some deal on the territories. That was kind of an odd thing, that they were happy that they were able to bring up a subject in 3 hours talk about, which is the one subject that all Japanese are concerned about in terms of Russo-Japanese relations. That he was able to bring it up is a source of joy. That sounded kind of weird, but that was part of a weird European tour in general, going to all these different capitals and all these countries as some kind of warm-up act for the Ise summit that's happening at the end of the month.
Right. Don't you feel he's positioning himself to be, I am a global leader and people listen to me, and my idea about Abenomics and boosting, the strength of the yen, these things are working and you guys need to help me too.
Well, I don't think he wants to boost the strength of the yen. I think everybody's pretty sure that that's a real arrow through the heart, not one of those 3 arrows of growth. And as for his wish to appear a world leader, he's been prime minister for 3 years. What does he have to prove? But it's true. We're seeing a really weird dynamic in that the Kante, the prime minister's residence, is really pushing the imagery of leadership. Meeting with people and taking stances. At the same time, there's a tremendous erosion going on underneath of what it is that is the functions of government. We're seeing in the Diet a real slowdown.
What is going on there? I mean, of all of the bills that have been proposed, it looks like only 2 might squeak through.
I know, and we're here in May, and the session's going to go all the way into June.
Right.
And we're only going to have 2 bills out of that?
What happened to TPP?
Oh, let's not even talk about what happened to TPP, because that seems to be just an insult.
What a waste of time.
You bring it up, you immediately go into hiatus over it due to the issues of scandal and other external problems, and then you drop it. Why did you go through this? There's an extraordinary session in the fall. They could have had some kind of sense of what's going on in the U.S. political scene, whether it's going to go forward there or not. Instead, they introduce it, and now it's just going to sit in committee, and nothing's going to happen to it.
Let's get back to the conversation between Putin and Abe about potentially the northern territories. When I first read that, and I heard that there might be a story leaking out of that, and probably it's still going to take time before anything becomes public, but I was really hopeful that, yes, maybe this trade-off is maybe on the boards once again. I think you probably have a different view of that.
I have a really different view of it, and that's partially because of where I sit right now. I'm teaching at Temple University, Japan, and right across from me is really one of the great experts on the Northern Territories issue, James Brown. Not that James Brown, but another
Watch
James. Yes, he has shown relatively definitively, in a definitive way, that the Russian side does not see there to be any deal on territory. If there's going to be anything, it is going to be an insulting reference to the 1956 deal, which was offered by the Soviet Union to Prime Minister Hatoyama of the time. And that deal was for 7% of the Northern Territories, the Habomai Islets and
that's not going to fly.
Shikotan. And on the Japanese side, that's not going to fly.
Not going to fly.
Their idea is 4 islands or nothing, or
maybe 2.
But the thing is that the Russians would then say, here are the 2. Habomai and Shikotan, there you got it. And the Japanese side said, but that's 7% of the land area. These are seriously large islands you're asking us to give up that were, declared ours in the 1850s. We had a deal with the Tsar.
Right.
We have multiple international agreements saying that these things are ours. Why you're going to give us 7%? And that's only if Putin, for some reason, has a political epiphany. Most likely that there's absolutely nothing on the table. That's the first reason I'm doubtful that there's anything that's going to happen there. The second is that I have a personal bugbear inside the Japanese government, and that's Special Advisor Seiko Hiroshige. Anything, in my view, that Seiko Hiroshige touches is dead in the water. And I've said this about him many, many times. And who did Abe bring with him to Sochi? Seiko. And if you look at the Conte's webpage or video clips from newscasts, it's like he's attached to him by an umbilical cord. Seiko is in every shot, and you say, God, that is so creepy. And at that point, in my own personal response is nothing's gonna happen, and that's just my own personal prejudice.
Okay,
and I'm sorry that I have it.
Sure. Well, we can hash this over and inside and outside, but this is the stumbling block between the Japanese and the Russians getting back together. I mean, they're still essentially at a state of war. I mean, there hasn't been no peace treaty signed, specifically because of the return of the Four Islands.
And one of the things that James Brown has really tried to explain to Japanese readers is that for the Russians, it's been a war of attrition since the 1850s. They feel like they were pushed back by the expansion of the Japanese Empire, and that the taking of the southern Kurils, as they call them, is only a minor pushback from what they should have received or they could have received. That in a historical sense, there's nothing that has been, there's no injustice, that no matter what the Japanese side says. And yes, technically, this is the weirdest thing, World War II is not over.
Right. It is a weird thing.
It is so strange to conceive that 70 years on, Russia and its the predecessor, the Soviet Union, they have been at war. Now, there is the 1956 deal, which allowed for the establishment of diplomatic relations in this state of war. But nevertheless, there's no peace treaty. There's no resolution of anything. And Mr. Abe comes into office promising that he's going to get the Four Islands back. And I don't know what he's expended so much time.
Right.
He's met Putin more than any world leader, and by a factor of 2. And what is this all about? Well, he committed to it, and he's going to stay with it. Is there a real need to have Russo-Japanese relations? Sure. And it's all about gas and oil.
Right.
And the Sakhalin area, gas fields and oil fields, those are there. And while they don't mind selling all of that energy to the Chinese and to the Koreans, they'd like to have other customers. It's always good to have a good mix of customers, which is what the Russians are learning in terms of the Europeans, that they need to have groups that are not coordinated together politically as their customers, as the Europeans are, or have been for the most part. Having these warring parties, warring in a mild sense, China, South Korea, Japan, competing for Russian oil and gas, is great for Russia. And so they do want to have a deal with Tokyo on that.
Right. Yeah. Well, Russia is isolated. There's geopolitics going on here. It's not just about the oil and gas. The Prime Minister, Mr. Abe, visiting Putin is a big deal. I mean, nobody has done that. No Western
the
leader
Western
has done
Alliance is supposed to stay away from him. Yes,
Right.
because
And
of Crimea, because of Ukraine. Yes,
and this is beyond what the president said. President Obama said, "Please don't go," and he went.
Well, I'm not privy to their conversations, but certainly it was not done with a smile on his face, whatever it was that President Obama had to say about this. Nevertheless, one of the aspects of Japan's autonomy, well, because Japan has this really bizarre role internationally, in that it is so dependent on the United States for its own defense, and so it's had to, in almost all cases, defer to the United States' wishes and wills in terms of its own conduct of international relations. One of the places where Japanese prime ministers have traditionally exercised a great deal of autonomy is with relations with first the Soviet Union and then with Russia. They have a little bit of an out there. Of course, it's again an asymmetric relationship there because the Russians have something that the Japanese really want, the islands. And the Japanese sort of have something that the Russians want.
Right.
In the 1990s, it was different because the Russians were in such economic crisis. The money that Japan could wave at them did ameliorate that asymmetry, but the asymmetry has returned.
Right.
And the Japanese are the beggars in this one.
Right. Well, with all due respect to Professor Brown, I remain hopeful that, this is the stumbling block, and to move Japan further away from the United States, which the Prime Minister wants to do, to establish his own credentials. And we've got the Issei Summit coming up. He wants to carve his position in world history.
But the thing is, we're not seeing from the Russian military a stand down. Instead, we see increased numbers of intrusions into the Japanese air defense space that Japan has declared, or at least skirting alongside it so that Japanese fighters have to scramble and meet these Russian planes. We see a great deal of maritime cooperation between Russia and China and joint military exercises very close to Japanese straits. That kind of action should be sending a message to the Kante saying, let's be realistic. It's a great power. It has interest working with other great powers, and Japan is a major power, but not a great power.
Well, I think we can anticipate the Prime Minister releasing some of the details about his 3-hour tete-a-tete with the Russian president in the coming weeks. Please stay tuned.